The day she left me. The precise moment you stop being visible to someone who once depended on you for breathing is something you never forget. On the second Tuesday of March, I discovered the orange ribbon, the one containing the dried pens and old batteries stuffed into the kitchen rubbish drawer. It still had a slight scent of my lemongrass laundry detergent, and it was crumpled and somewhat torn at the edges. For the past 3 years, I had tied it into young Addie's hair virtually every Sunday morning. It was always her decision, and the same ribbon. At brunch, it was the only thing that prevented her beautiful curls from getting into her soup. It sat there like a thrown-away receipt that morning. Not a word. No farewell. No justification. All I heard was that ribbon and a deafening quiet. Addie had left. My niece Tori's mother was also in agreement. With my coffee still unfinished and cold on the counter, I stood barefoot in the kitchen and listened to the abrupt silence where 2 lives formerly echoed. They're not coming back. The old farmhouse creaked as if clearing its throat. I made one call, directly to voicemail. I sent a text. No answer. I waited. For a day, next 3, next a week. I was working at my second job when they left. They stole the rocking chair from the sunroom along with their clothes and Addie's toys, all without saying a word. I raised that child for 5 years, while Tori figured things out. Now it seems she had. There was no dispute over custody, no significant impasse, nothing that would be suitable for a Lifetime film. A woman who once referred to me as her second mom, determining that I wasn't even worthy of discussion. It dawned on me then, holding that smashed ribbon, that she didn't simply leave me. I was erased by her. Like I was a stand-in, helpful then useless, as if I never helped that child learn to read or get over his fear of thunderstorms, as if I were unimportant. And I believed her for a moment. It's often said that a village is needed to raise a child, but nobody ever explains what happens when there's only one weary mother, a used Nissan, and a pantry full of macaroni. When Addie was 2.5 years old, Tori and Addie arrived at my house with a face full of regret and a garbage bag full of clothes. It was transient, she replied, till she landed on her feet. That is, I made no inquiries. I opened the door after noticing the black circles beneath her eyes and the way Addie held on to her leg. On the couch, I made a bed. I bought a lot of fruit snacks. To spend more time at home, I rearranged my work schedule. It was not intended to last forever. However, the problem with temporary is that it subtly turns into permanent when no end date is specified. Tori jumped between jobs. She tried working as a waitress selling vitamins online, and even participating in a pyramid scam that involved energy stones and essential oils. It didn't stick at all. She was constantly on the edge of something big, hoping that the next opportunity or gig would put things right. I looked after Addie in the interim. Her preschool meals were packed by me. I attended all of her dental appointments. When she finally stopped blocking her nose, I clapped like she had won the Olympics and showed her how to float in the lake behind our house. I was dubbed a saint by Tori. "I don't know how you do it, Aunt Ro," she would say. "This is what you were meant to do." That used to make me smile. Love was the feeling. Or, at least, appreciation. However, I now recognize it as a performance. Permission. In other words, keep doing the difficult work so I don't have to. However, I didn't mind at the time. Since Addie wasn't difficult, she was all questions, curls, and sticky fingers encircling mine. "You're my Auntie Mama," she would mumble as she patted my face in the morning. And I thought that perhaps I was in some quiet, hidden corner of my heart. It wasn't flawless. Signs were present. Small things that gnawed at the boundaries of my confidence. Like the time Tori tried to hide Addie's birthday with a cake from the gas station at the last minute since she had forgotten it. For example, she was at a networking brunch with a man whose last name she couldn't recall, so she missed the preschool recital. Then there was the job I helped her land at the assisted living facility. In the first 2 weeks, she called in sick 3 times, and when she was fired, she blamed me. That night, she paced the kitchen wearing one of my old sweaters and yelled, "You set me up to fail, Ro. You wanted to remain the hero, so you wanted me to ruin it." I was astounded, not only the charge, but the poison that accompanied it. I was completely unaware of her feelings. The orange ribbon Addie always wore on Sundays was still on my pillow when I went to my room that evening. I wondered if it was Addie's way of apologizing for her mother, so I lifted it up and put it to my lips, or worse, goodbye. Then, however, as always, things settled down. After a few days, Tori apologized, claimed to be overburdened, that she admired Addie's love for me. One evening on the porch, she muttered, "Without you, I'd crumble." And I took her word for it. In actuality, I needed Addie just as much. The years were hazy. Addie became tall and intelligent. Long after nighttime had passed, she would sneak into my room to ask for bedtime stories and sketch comics in my notepads. Tori began to spend fewer weekends at home and more nights with friends. However, she always returned in the end, always just enough to give me hope that she would want to be the type of mother Addie believed she was. Then, she did not return at all. Don't fight. No farewell. Only the ribbon. Similar to a receipt for work done. The truth didn't come as a shock. Tucked away in a long-forgotten coloring book at the bottom of Addie's old toy basket, it arrived gently, almost courteously. A few weeks after they disappeared, I was organizing her belongings. I had to act like I was in charge of anything, not because I was prepared to let go. I promised myself that the toys would be donated. However, I was unable to touch the ribbon. Her favorite book, Mermaid Kingdom, slipped out of the basket as soon as I opened it. Pink markers and glittering crayons were used to color on half of the pages. Despite myself, I grinned as I gently turned through it and listened to Addie's little voice describe her imaginary sea world. Then I noticed something. A folded piece of paper, a printed flyer with wrinkles at the edges, was tucked between the pages. On the surface, it appeared to be one of those inspirational self-help advertisements that you see on neighborhood bulletin boards next to posters for lost dogs and babysitting services. But my stomach churned when I took a closer look. It was an application for an Asheville Holistic Family Fellowship. Financial grants and residential support for single mothers with strong values and minimal external attachments is what this private organization offers. Very few external attachments. I repeated the sentence. And once more. Perhaps instead of feeling like a knife to the breast, the words would reorganize themselves. I read the remainder of the flyer. Sole caregiving status and limited co-parental involvement were prerequisites for eligibility. A handwritten letter in Tori's looping script was located at the bottom. Don't forget to take Aunt Ro off of the school forms. I took a seat on the ground and gazed at that line for a while. In my hot hands, the cheap paper became pliable. That was it. She hadn't left because she was ashamed or in need of space badly. She needed me to vanish, so she left. Because she was rewarded for acting as though I never existed by some system or opportunity. Something that needed a tidy story. An unaided single mother. No safety net. That little child had another home, but no one else could say that. One more mother figure. One more reality. Her application was complicated by me. And like an old paper, she had filed me away. I felt like screaming. To give her a call. To drive across the border between states and knock on the door of the granola commune she had entered. However, I didn't. Instead, I sobbed into a folded piece of paper that demonstrated that I had been purposefully erased while sitting there surrounded by glitter pens and cuddly animals. It went beyond simple desertion. It was a plan. And the most vicious aspect, it was successful. Because who would believe me even if I told everyone I was not bound by any legal documents to Addie? No claims to custody, no guardianship, no academic records. Tori had always assured me that it was easier if she would handle the forms. I gave that child my all attention, making her lunches, kissing her bruised knees, and braiding her hair for picture day. Yet it all came to nothing. On paper, anyhow. I hardly recall getting to my feet. I simply recall entering the kitchen and taking the orange ribbon from the counter, clutching it as if it would provide me with answers. That's when Marcus arrived. Before I left to care for Addie full-time, he was one of the nurses I worked with at the rehab facility. I suppose he noticed the warning signs, missed calls, ignored texts, and my withdrawal, even though we hadn't spoken in a few months. Like he often did when he brought me coffee from the gas station. After night shifts, he knocked, waited precisely 5 seconds, and then let himself in. He put down 2 styrofoam cups and a brown bag and murmured softly, "Hey, you appeared to be in need of a breakfast sandwich." Given that he didn't even wait for polite conversation, I must have looked like hell. Simply waited while seated at the table across from me. I told him everything. The years, the faith, the flyer, the handwriting. On this occasion, I did not cry. I was too worn out. He slumped back in his chair, shook his head, and whistled softly when I finished. He remarked, "She removed you from the story," and revised it for the award. I tightened my fingers on the ribbon and nodded. "And you're going to give the pen to her?" he inquired. I was stopped by that, because I hadn't even thought of writing something myself. The following few days were peculiar. They were silent in a way that caused things to reverberate, yet neither loud nor explosive. I returned to my part-time job at the rehabilitation facility. Instead of a creeping heartbreak, the staff greeted me as though I had just returned from a lengthy vacation. When patients inquired about my whereabouts, I always replied that I had been home, a phrase that always stopped in my throat. I went through my routines automatically. The linens were folded, charts were modified. When old Mr. Dietz asked the same 3 questions every morning, I smiled at him. All of it was muscle memory. On the inside, though, I was caught between anger and grief, between wanting her to pay and just wanting Addie to be all right. Then I discovered something odd one morning as I was cleaning out a closet in the therapy wing. A family intake confidential cardboard box. Normally the admin desk handled those files, so I wouldn't have touched it. But out of habit, I leaned to close the lid after it had fallen halfway open. I froze when I saw the name on the top form. Whitman Tori. My niece. I gave it my full 10 seconds of attention before carefully removing it. Last month it was dated, application for her mother's emergency. In her holistic family retreat, Tori apparently brought in our estranged grandma Edith, whom she had previously referred to as a toxic relic, stating that she was now her only caregiver and required temporary placement. Tori's name was on it, but who was the emergency contact I was listed by her? My entire name. Here's my number, my address. Irony struck like a blow to the breast. In order to be eligible for a fellowship that recognized independent motherhood, she had removed me from Addie's life. However, she continued to use my name behind the scenes whenever it was practical or she needed support. I wasn't erased by her. She had simply concealed me, took advantage of me, and for the first time I recognized her for who she was. Not overwhelmed, not gone, calculated. The flyer was still crumpled next to me when I sat down at my dining table that evening, after taking the ribbon from my nightstand. Marcus had been correct. She had changed the narrative. However, she wasn't the only pen wielder. I had no desire for vengeance. Not in the sense that most people believe. I didn't want to ruin her life or arrive in Asheville with a file of receipts and a bullhorn. All I wanted was my voice back, to complete the record. I scanned the flyer after that, discovered the webpage of the organization, looked up the directors on their board. I then sent an email. There was no drama, no capitalization, not a threat, just the facts. I identified myself to them. The things I had done for Addie during the last 5 years. I added pictures of Addie on her first day of school, her artwork of me and my 2 mommies, and the 2 of us baking cookies. A scan of the coloring book page, including the handwritten message, "Remove Aunt Row from the school forms," is attached. I then penned one last sentence. I don't want credit money or custody. I only want to confirm that the persons who truly live the story are included in the version you are endorsing. Sincerely, I didn't sign it. Roe Whitmore. I just wrote. I then clicked send. I had no expectations. That's why I double-checked the authenticity of an email I received 2 days later from the Director of Residential Fellows, Elaine Gibbons. To Ms. Whitmore, I appreciate your email and your candor. Community integrity is very important to us. Due to discrepancies in Ms. Whitman's caregiving history and application documents, we have chosen to withdraw her acceptance into the program after examining your submission and carrying out our own investigation. Although we are unable to disclose precise results, know that your input enabled us to make sure that our assistance is directed toward people who genuinely share our objective. Sincerely, Gibbons Elaine. That was it. Don't apologize. Not much fanfare. However, it was sufficient. Tori didn't give a call, did not send a text, but I was aware of the consequences. How? Because I received a pale yellow envelope in my mailbox 2 weeks later. No address for return. There was a picture inside, Addie occupying a seat facing a mural of sunflowers. Her eyes remained distinct, and her curls became slightly longer. Attached to the picture, the orange ribbon. Not a word. No justification. However, it provided me with all the information I required, she recalled. And she hadn't really eliminated me after all someplace deep inside that tiny heart. The ribbon was returned. I now keep the ribbon in the drawer next to my bed because it reminds me of who I truly was in the story, not because I hope she will return, not the placeholder. The footnote. No, the constant. The one who stayed through difficult times, listened to all dreams, and held small hands during thunderstorms, school mornings, and stomach viruses. I believed for a time that I needed to demonstrate that to Tori, the program, and possibly even Addie. However, the reality is that love isn't always obvious, audible, or documented. It can be quiet at times. Tiny, ingrained in routines, Tuesday meals, and shabby bedtime novels. Even if no one else signs the form, sometimes it's sufficient to know that it happened. Nearly 6 months have passed since I sent that email. I don't anticipate Tori to get in touch, and she hasn't. She moved again this time to a co-housing community south of Denver, according to a mutual acquaintance. She shares posts about spiritual retreats and reclaiming feminine energy. Addie occasionally appears in the pictures, usually smiling and perfectly placed. I would look at those photos and try to find hints. Is she all right? Is she content? Does she recall the times we used to applaud for ducks, just to get her to laugh, or the Sunday breakfasts and lake swims? However, I gave up looking, because I came to the realization that I can find serenity without dwelling on the life I was cut off from. Together we created something tangible. Furthermore, just because something is no longer public doesn't mean it stops existing. After my shifts, Marcus and I occasionally go on a walk. I act as though I don't detest the terrible coffee he delivers from the gas station. He never attempts to make things better. I'm still getting used to the fact that he simply comes up. We sat on his car's hood one night and watched the stars one by one flicker on. He inquired as to whether I had ever considered attempting to get back in touch filing a lawsuit, or simply getting in touch. I gave a head shake. I responded, "She would just twist it. Make it into something different." Additionally, Addie deserves a life free from that tug of war. He gave a nod. However, what if she does knock on your door? I grinned. An extra toothbrush and pancakes will be waiting. I had believed that healing would have the feel of a movie's conclusion, complete with sweeping music, a sunset, and a significant personal metamorphosis. It feels like folding warm washing, though. It's like laughing with a friend who understands your silences while watching a stupid TV show. It's like purchasing shampoo because you're out of it, rather than because you think someone else might use it. It's like not feeling lonely while sitting by yourself on your porch. Perhaps Addie will inquire about me at some point. Perhaps she will recall the Sunday ribbons are made-up songs, and the fact that I always let her crack the eggs, despite the fact that she always ended up with a shell in the bowl. Perhaps she will have the guts to look me up, or perhaps she won't. In any case, I am aware of who I was, and what I wasn't. And that's okay with me. Because justice doesn't always appear in a courtroom or during a confrontation. Justice can sometimes be as simple as realizing that you gave it your all, and that you are still someone worth remembering, even if they made an effort to ignore you.